Welcome to a show about learning technologies so powerful they transcend the boundaries of reality itself. I'm your host, Pinky Gonzalez, and this is New School VR. All right, live in the studio today, we have Portland legend Paul Reynolds, founder of Vertex Labs 3D, longtime engineer in a number of interesting companies we're about to walk through. And to say he's a VR expert, AR, MR expert is a little bit of an understatement. He's actually been involved in the making of this stuff from the ground up and in more capacities than one. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
What are we going to talk about?
Anything. I can talk about anything all day long. I've figured out.
Why don't we go all the way back? How did you get started in your career?
Yeah. I was born and raised in South Carolina. All through high school, I wanted to be a graphic designer. And I learned how to use a Macintosh. This is back like post desktop publishing, when that was actually a term, days, and people were starting to get Macs to do what they called typesetting back then. Mm-hmm. And so, but also Macs were like, I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000 at the time, and I was a 14-year-old kid. So the only way I could really get my hands on that stuff was to learn how to run a printing press. So I took a trade school class in high school, and I did all my printing press projects in the first month or two, and then spent the whole rest of the school year on the computer doing typesetting and design for the school district.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, I definitely like it. And it was all about working with the computer, I realized later, but it was also about being creative and kind of having this ability to create these things. And so I continued down that career path until I eventually wound up at a daily newspaper in the advertising department designing ads. And they had just switched over to what they call digital layout.
And this is Sun News, yeah?
This is the Sun News, right. So, it was owned by a company called Knight Ridder that owned something like 15 or 20 papers across the, this is back when newspapers actually made money and were, thriving. So around 1996 or 7, I was in the ad department, and I heard that they were going to build a website for the newspaper. And I saw that they had a committee, and I saw who was on the committee, and I was like, I bet these people don't even use like the web. And at this time it was not, I used it all the time, but it was still not popular. And so I was like, kind of volunteered myself on the committee. And then one Saturday I went and bought a scanner for my Mac from Sears.
Nice.
Put it on a credit card. That Saturday I scanned in the entire newspaper and laid it out in HTML and showed it to them as a prototype. And I pretty much bought myself a job right then and there. So I helped build the department. So by this time I'm like 23 or so, and I'm a manager, and I start running the online department. And the first few months was literally waiting till the paper finished, which is usually around 11 o'clock or midnight, and copying and pasting text from their publishing system to web pages. Wow. So it's all hand coded. The daily paper was hand coded every day.
But the load times are just wicked.
Yeah, it was very efficient. It was very efficient HTML.
Of course, everybody was on a 56K modem, but
yeah, and actually we were selling dial-up internet as a part of the deal, which is kind of funny. You could come get a floppy disk for me, and I could give you some internet. So I had always dabbled in programming, even before the print shop days. I had like a Commodore, and I always wrote BASIC. Something about it appealed to me, but I didn't have anyone to help me understand what everything I could do with it. So I was like typing in code from magazines and stuff like that. I had no idea what it was. I just wanted to see it work. So by this time I'm at the paper, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And so we start, my team and I start figuring out how to automate. And like I said, I'd always been a hobbyist software developer, but that was where I'd actually started building things that like had an immediate result that people could see. So basically, all of a sudden, the entire newspaper's online, and I woke up the next morning and I get to read it online, and I wasn't the one that pasted it in.
Mm.
And we kept taking it further and further, and I just started falling in love with software more and more. So then what I realized was I'm actually a technical creative person, and that I did want to be a graphic designer, but the part I loved about graphic design was the architecture of the layout or the composition and working with typography. And it's not that different actually from software development. So I was like, I want to do this full time, but I'm still in South Carolina. There is practically no software jobs in South Carolina, especially in the coast. So I moved to Chicago for a job as a full-time software developer. Got into the video game industry in Chicago. That first company was called Jellyvision. They're still around today. They suffered some setbacks during the dot-com bust, so that's when I moved, was just before this happened. So we're talking about 2000, and so I moved to San Diego to work for EA, and I started becoming more and more of a lead engineer and leading teams. And then that studio shut down, and I went down the street and worked for an independent studio called Soulworks, who had a bunch of deals with Sony. So we did a bunch of PlayStation 2 games, and that studio shut down. So
you got a knack.
Let me know when you recognize the pattern. Yeah, let me know when you feel it.
The second and final episode of New School VR.
So I was on this podcast and then it shut down. Yeah, that's kind of sad. So yeah, I wound up in Seattle at Atari, and I have been through enough shutdowns. Obviously, this was like I'd been through 4 studio closures. I knew this ship was sinking too, but this time I was ahead of the game. So
you can't fire me. I quit.
Yeah, exactly. At this time, I was pretty burned out by the industry. I was like not even just lead. I was something like senior lead engineer. I was over multiple teams, and the industry is small. The interview process can be brutal for a high tech position. But that's what I always loved about video games. Video games are super creative, but they're also, when I was growing up, software development for video games was the hardest software development you could do, because you've got to be, these machines were so constrained. You had to be performance oriented. You had to be like, you had to know, you couldn't just write code and if it worked, ship it. You had to understand how the tech worked from the metal up, and everything was optimized, because every bit of optimization gave you that much more creative freedom. So that was what was always so satisfying about it, was working on these projects where they would ask for something, the creative director might ask for something, and it's kind of your challenge for how to squeeze it out of this technology, right? So I loved that. But it was just becoming, the interview process was just, I just couldn't even bear to think about it. So by this time, web applications had become more mature. It wasn't just web pages anymore.
About what year are we in?
We're talking about 2004 or 5, so pre-iPhone still. I love that. That's my timeline. That's my milestone. So yeah, I was like, I've always had the entrepreneurial pull too. So I was like, I'm gonna go back to South Carolina, where I know I can live cheap. I cashed out of my house in Seattle, and I'm going to start businesses. I can build web applications for anybody from anywhere. That's the other thing about me, is I've always been so sufficiently self-taught that, like, I know I'm pretty skilled in about 7 or 8 programming languages, and probably know 2 or 3 more that I could, work in. So I was like, I can build web applications. I can do something like that.
Just a real quick side note. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too far here, but for those listening to the show that are interested in the engineering side and how they might get involved in this kind of stuff, how have you gone about learning 7+ languages?
So mine started with the computer magazines when I was a kid. And then when I was at the paper, I was at the Barnes & Noble technical book section. I would, those big 400-page phone book books, I devoured those things. So I would read those things over and over, and I would just write code. Honestly, it's never been easier, right? Because you can go online. There's so many great tutorials. Most of these tutorials allow you to interactively code along with them. And it's also a little bit like, once you learn one Latin language, the other ones become easier. So it is like, once you get over that mental hump of how it works, I would suggest anybody interested in learning would probably look into either JavaScript or C Sharp. Those will give you a taste of what all the other programming languages have, and there's so much material and support and community effort around that. So yeah, I kind of did it the hard way with like I had to read books and like hope I got it, and there was no videos, there was no interactive coding or anything like that. And
YouTube
then
wasn't a thing yet.
yeah, and then once I got in the game industry, because it is such a kind of a black art version of engineering and programming, you're surrounded by so many smart people. If you're a sponge, you will learn from those people. So I have a lot of really deeply burned in kind of coding philosophies from that have served me well beyond video games, right? Because we have, it was always the most optimal. You understand what's actually happening when you write this code. You have to. Um, so yeah, so by this time I'm doing like a lot of to get more specific, on the game side I was doing a lot of C++, and then on the website it was still a lot of Java type stuff. So I moved back to South Carolina, just completely self-employed and independent from 2006 up until 2014, and everything in there was I've just now started talking about some of these things because most of the time when we talk, it's talking about my 3D background and my interactive background. So I always had a game project going, whether it was a work for hire or an independent project, or I had some sort of interactive 3D thing going. And that's when we started doing stuff for Monterey Bay Aquarium. We did about 6 exhibits there. We did their first real-time 3D interactive exhibit. And what that means is Monterey Bay Aquarium has this prop making shop, and all of their exhibits were like practical physical, like you push the button and the squid thing twitches and lights up, and it's like physical props. And they were starting to dabble with digital, but they didn't have the 3D background on it, so they had a couple flash guys on staff. And but what they were finding was kids that had grown up with smartphones were coming to the aquarium and like pinch zooming placards, and like they're like, we need a little bit more digital interactivity here. And so that's how we had a really good relationship with them, and did that for several years. Did all kinds of client work.
How far do you get involved personally in the theory or the experiential thinking itself, whether it's in the game side, game mechanics, game logic, storyline? Obviously on the education side, Monterey Bay Aquarium, do they come to you with a wish list and you just say, well, we can do that, it'll be 3 weeks, or how do you interact there?
Yeah. So I think one of my things that has been beneficial is that I'm kind of product minded, and I think it is because of all this crazy other stuff I've done. So I can go as technical as anybody wants to get, but I also can have a kind of high level conversation about what are the goals here, and then the other thing I've prided myself on is trying to understand the creative direction or the goal of the project, and offering up like guidance and creative direction without stepping on the toes of the people driving the project, but basically being a participant in the project to say, we could do it this way. This is possible. And it's things that people don't know are possible because they're not on the technical side. So I kind of like bubble that stuff up, or, in the midst of a project, have the confidence to be able to say, like, I think we can actually do this thing that it was nothing, anything any of us planned for, but it's that much better. And we've had tons of breakthroughs like that, right? Like you always start going in one direction, and then if you allow yourself some flexibility, new stuff comes up that you never would have thought of. Nice. So all this stuff has played really well into like with the next chapter, which was in 2014. I joined Magic Leap. The backstory there was, by this time I had done 5 or 6 years of just independent work, lots of smartphone apps, Android, BlackBerry, iOS, lots of 3D projects, the exhibits at the aquarium, several web applications. Like I said, I would just whatever I'm interested in the goal and the project, not the technology behind it. I will figure out how to do that part. So anyway, so we're kind of this independent developer, and started teaming up with people. And I have to give credit to my friend Spencer, who he's currently at Magic Leap. Spencer's the one that got us that connection to Monterey Bay Aquarium,
Uh-huh.
and he's the technical artist part of our little. We used to joke that he's the rapper and I'm the DJ. So like we kind of stole that
You guys
from
need a hype
we
man at all?
stole that from Fresh Prince. But yeah, between him and I, like, and he's also kind of the same thing, but he comes in with the kind of 3D art angle. So between the two of us, we were doing complete projects with these clients, and it was fun. And then we would do independent stuff in between the gaps. So the nice thing about it was, usually when you do work for hire or agency type work, it's very lumpy income. But in our case, that worked to our favor, because what we do is save up our
Save your
little
lumps.
nest egg. Yeah. And then we would work on whatever. So then we we got pulled in by Graham Devine. Graham was working at the same co-working space as Spencer in Santa Cruz. And so Graham pulled us in so here's a little Portland connection for you. Graham got approached by Wyden and Kennedy and Leica to work on an iPhone game for Paranorman the movie. So Graham was like, I can take this project on if you guys can help me. So we did that together. And that was kind of a pressure cooker that kind of bonded us a little bit. And then we did a few more projects, all because of Graham. Like we did a couple of Apple projects. And then we did a project with Harman Kardon, came in through Spencer. And that was kind of our little collective. Like somebody would bring in a project and we would chew on it together. So things were going actually really well. And Graham, out of all of us, did not need a job. And he's like, I'm taking a job in 2013. And he was like, it's a company called Magic Leap. And nobody had heard of Magic Leap in 2013. The interesting backstory to that is Magic Leap had actually been kind of spinning up since 2011 or so, 2012 or so.
Wow.
But still nobody had heard of it. He's like, I don't even know if they're legit or not, but what they're saying they're doing is amazing. I'm going to go check it out, but I can't talk about it. And so he went ahead. He was the canary in the coal mine. He went and checked it out. And then a couple months later, he was like, their tech is real. I think you guys could do a lot of interesting stuff here. I know you don't want jobs. I will give you a contract, and but it will come with a job offer. Be ready. And so anyway, to shorten that up, we signed on. We started working with Magic Leap in January 2014. Finalized the employment agreement and signed on officially as full-time employees in April, but we'd already been working with them for a few months at that point. And the original plan was to build a content development studio for mixed reality or augmented reality. The other part of it was I was super interested in augmented reality about 2 years before that, and I'd always pitched an augmented reality component to all these clients that we were working with, especially the aquarium.
So I want to come back to those themes very specifically
Yeah.
here in just a second. So you work with, or I should say, those that know Magic Leap is like the most hyped company nobody's ever actually seen a product from in the history of
Right.
the world.
Yeah, some record raising, fundraising going on there.
Yeah, $1.4 billion is what word on the street is for a company with literally nothing to sell yet, as far as any end user is concerned. So we'll come back to that in just a beat here. But so you're there, and what brings you to Portland?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Magic Leap for 2.5 years. I wound up in a role I never would have imagined, which was great. I was over both the software developer tools, or the SDK, and all of the applications that are user facing that are not games. And so, I worked with a ton of third parties, and it was a much bigger role than I ever thought I would have at the company, and I really appreciated that. But I had been in Florida for 2 years. It was a good transition time for my position at the company, so I was very upfront with the executives, and we talked about all the different ways it could go. And ultimately, I decided, hey, I'm super interested in all this VR stuff that's going on, but I can't really engage in that with my current role. I have a lot of, after years of thinking deeply in this space, I see all these opportunities that I could pursue. So I could have, I could have just kept with the status quo, but I was like, we're ready for a geographical change, and I was ready for like, I'm at the cusp of a revolution, and I see all these giant holes to fill. Why would I like just stick to one platform and one company, and I can help so many people, and that's, I couldn't do that as much either in my role. So yeah, ultimately decided we wanted to be autonomous and independent, go back to being more of a scrappier startup mode. I mean, Magic Leap is still a startup, but it's a big one. And we fell in love with Portland. Portland was the one place that my wife nor I had ever visited, and we came here to evaluate it as a place to live. And by day 2, we were like, this is us. This is our place. So and a lot of that was based off not only what we saw like as visitors, like of course the food here is amazing, the beer here is amazing, the access to outdoors is amazing, the downtown is so cool, but it's not too big, it's not too small, it's like all these great things. But to me, the community part. So one of the things I did during that stint in South Carolina being entrepreneurial was I started a co-working space, because I knew there was a lot of people that there wasn't a lot of big tech companies there, but there was a lot of people that were techies that worked from home, or they were the IT guy at the insurance office, or there were people there. There were technical people everywhere, and I wanted to give them a sense of community. And so we started this happy hour thing called the Geek Out. And the Geek Out was all about, hey, your everyday life here in South Carolina as a technical person, you're surrounded by people that don't understand what you're talking about, and you have to pre-explain before you can get to your point. And this is a event you can come to where you can rattle off acronyms all day long and you don't have to explain what they mean, and it's just a comfort, like-minded thing. And so that started building up to like 20 or 30 people. And then meanwhile, I'm doing this work with Spencer and Graham out of this co-working space on the West Coast, and I'm quite literally profiting from this community on the West Coast, 2,500 miles away. I'm getting opportunities out of it. So I saw the power of that. And I'm like, okay, I have 30 people that I can gather at any given time. Surely, if I can get 5 of those people to pay a full-time membership, we could build a space. And I went the route of trying to go through economic development and get like free retail space to build it. And I burned probably 6 or 10 months on trying to like scrap together like a community created space, and finally I just bit the bullet and out of pocket.
Sorry,
and just
community.
yeah,
Let's just do this.
let's just do it. Yeah. I mean, I gave it a shot, and I think it's a fair thing to try to do. But eventually it was like, I just want this to happen, I'm going to pay for it. So we started the space. Interesting anecdote, out of all those 30 people that came to the happy hour, very, very, very few, maybe 1 or 2, actually became any sort of paying member in the space. But the space filled up with more technical and creative people that were paying that I had never found before. So once again, we saw that power of community. Everybody got real close. I'm still close friends with pretty much all of them, still advising some of them. They come visit, we visit them. Friends for life, basically. So when I came to Portland and I met with Rick Terozzi,
Shout out to Rick Terozzi.
Yeah. Everybody owes Rick something in the Portland startup scene.
When he starts calling those favors, it's going to be ugly.
Oh man, he's got a stack.
I mean, we should just start calling him Mayor Rick now.
Yeah. It's funny. It is funny, and even still to this day, I get people who are like, "Have you met Rick yet?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've met Rick. I love Rick." So one thing that impressed me was like Portland's sense of collaborative community. And I actually have found out most recently that goes way back, back to like, there's an interesting story about the winery days here, where the wine industry actually, they shared equipment. If something broke, another winery would help you out, and they helped each other grow the industry together. And then there's an anecdote about one of these wineries wanting more land, so they go to Washington State to buy a bigger plot of land, and they can't survive there because there's nobody there to like help hold them up. So Portland is all about collaboration and community, and I know that's the one thing that you can't buy or artificially create. And so I was like, I can work with this place. And then I knew there was some VR, AR activity here. But I just knew that it was a place people want to live and work with each other. And that was what sold me. So I was like, I know there's plenty of potential here for me to work
So
with.
you're still fresh off the
Yeah.
truck, as they say. When did you move to Portland?
So my last day at Magic Leap was in May, and
Of
then
2016?
this year. And then we took we planned a 6-week road trip from Florida to Oregon throughout the summer. It was just a rare opportunity where we had no timeline. We had no commitments or obligations. We already had our house locked down here.
Anybody
So
get dysentery along the way?
no,
Sorry,
we
obligatory Oregon joke.
no, but it was a peak of the summer is a tough summer. Oh, we were trying to camp as much as possible. So camping until you hit elevation. So camping all the way through till the Midwest is rough. So after having 2 years of Florida, basically after 2 years of being in Florida, and then this month-long camping road trip in the middle of summer, I was tired of sweating. I was done. So then we get here and come to find out Portland's hot in the summer. Who knew? So then we sweat for a couple more.
That, Paul.
I know. So we sweated for a couple more weeks, and then then we really got settled in August. And then my whole thing has been, I do have ideas that we are, this is the Vertex Labs part of it, but I do have some ideas that we're starting to prototype. But I'm not making any assumptions about if this is going to be commercially viable or not. I want to prototype it, get it in people's hands, and then we'll determine if it's something we want to build a bigger team and funding around. And I also want to leave myself open to whatever. So I didn't want to overly commit to building a company right out the gate. And I'm glad I didn't, because this whole past 3 months has been all about literally mapping who is here and what's going on.
Yeah, and you mean literally. So
yeah,
you
I made
put
a
together
map.
This Portland VR map. Talk to me about this. I think it's been a great tool, not only I'm sure for your own learning and charting of what's going on, but also for the community at large. It's been great.
Yeah, so I was kind of mentally mapping people I was meeting, and I'm like drawing these connections, and I've had it in my head, and then I would go to these introductory meetings, and I would usually, when I meet someone, I try to figure out how I can connect them. And in my mind, I'm like, do you know this person, they're connected to this thing? It's like, I need to visualize this, and I think it might be interesting for people to see. And then I went to meet with Andrew at University of Oregon Journalism School, and he told me about this tool called Kumu, and it's kumu.io, and he was like, you can map relationships. So I made it in an afternoon because I had all this stuff in my head, and people loved it, and it is a cool visualization. It shows you the clusters. I've got 5 main pillars that I think make a complete ecosystem. You've got focusing on AR and VR. So you've got investment, which is important. You've got community and education. Community and education gives you that that gives you your conduits to connect, and also builds up workforce and trains people and gives people exposure to these things. So it's super important. Hardware, which nobody would really guess. Portland's kind of a small town but we do. We have everything from Intel and all the way down to Nitero, which is a VR hardware startup. Global brands, again, unique to our area. We have access to Nike, Columbia, Intel. I count in that. All these crazy big companies that are all looking at this tech. They all want to stay relevant, and they want to see how it affects both their business operations, but also their products and the retail experience, all these things. And then you got apps and experiences, which is the most dense cluster, because a lot of people here want to make stuff for people. And so apps and experiences, and then there's a spectrum within that, everything from super artsy to and exploratory, up to startups that are just chasing ideas, all the way to I point to Dash as an example of people that have actually shipped commercial VR experiences a year ago, which is crazy.
Paul, are you aware that Dash is a sponsor of New School VR?
How convenient.
Yep. Shout out
How?
to Dot Dot Dash. As a matter of fact, I am borrowing a microphone. Thank you in particular to Nathan Jenkins for letting me jack his wares. He's our multimedia director, and the mic you're on right now, Paul, has been used by many famous people.
Oh wow! And with
Andre
that,
3000 comes to mind.
yeah,
If you're feeling if you want to do that rapper DJ thing, you let me know.
I like anyone that's a fan of hip hop. I think I could rap, but I won't attempt it.
I bet you sound great in the car.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so where can somebody go to check out this map if they want to see it today?
Probably the easiest URL is just blog.vertexlabs.co. VERTEX
Excellent.
.co, not .com.
No, why would we do that?
I can't afford it.
That's
The .co was $16. The .com is $6,000. So
you thought about maybe just choosing a different name?
well, I mean,
what is Vertex?
I use it as a
from?
motivator. I think if I can't turn this into a company where I can afford a $6,000 domain, what am I doing here? So it's my goal. So when you guys see vertexlabs.com come out, that means I've hit some sort of milestone.
When did you know that you'd made it? When I bought the domain.
I got the .com. I got the .com. Yeah,
that's pretty ballin'.
Yeah, Vertex Labs. It came out. So as soon as I left Magic Leap, I went to the Augmented World Expo, which is kind of this annual trade show for augmented reality, and I needed to give myself a shingle, so I wasn't just Paul the Magic Leap guy. And so I brainstormed. I had been brainstorming names for a long time anyway. I like Vertex because Vertex is the kind of primitive element in a 3D mesh or a 3D model. And so anybody that does any 3D graphics at all will know what a vertex is. It's just like the atom of our world. But it's also interesting because it's also an intersection point. So you usually create this mesh with an array of vertexes, and so these vertexes are these connecting points that hold everything kind of together. And then to pull it out even more heady, the more generic term for vertex is about this intersection. It's a point of intersection, and for me, that's always what I've done. It's this intersection of creative and technical. It's bringing all these crazy disciplines together into one little thing. And then labs was just because I like the idea of running a lab, doing weird, crazy stuff all the time.
I love it. Okay, so that's a brief history of Paul Reynolds, who's one of the innovators, engineers, designers of the virtual and augmented arts as we know them today. Let's bring it back to some of the core principles here. Walk us through your definition of the difference between VR, AR, and MR.
Yep. So I call it the acronym soup, and I'm trying to get it to stick where we just say VRARMR.
You have my vote.
VRARMR.
In fact, you'll know I've made it when you see
VRARMR.com. Just get the .com. So so VR is virtual reality, obviously. Hopefully everyone listening knows that one. To me, the current differences, and I've done this presentation before where I've talked about this, and I always caveat it with don't get too hung up in these definitions, because first of all, they're changing like crazy, and eventually it'll be as crazy as hearing someone say color TV. Like, when's the last time you heard anyone say stereophonic sound? Mm-hmm. But at the time, it was a technical differentiator that we had to call out. So virtual reality, to me, is something that immerses both your mostly your sight, but also usually your hearing. That completely synthetic world. Everything you see is virtual and rendered by a computer. And that's pretty much the definition I have for virtual reality. Within virtual reality, there's two main categories right now, and again, I think these are going to go away even faster than the bigger terms, which is mobile VR, which is usually a smartphone is providing the computer graphics rendering, the display, and the power. And so it's a very portable, easy form factor. There's a lot of people that have these devices that are capable of doing it, so there's a big install base. but it's very limited. It can only render so much. It can only run for so long in a battery, and there's only so much interactivity you can do. Generally, you're restricted to moving your head around and maybe being able to do some sort of confirmation input, which is like a tap or something. But it's very popular because it's the cheapest, easiest way to get into VR. And then you've got desktop or PC VR, which is the same principle. You're completely immersed in this synthetic virtual world, but your head is tracked rotationally and positionally. Your hands are usually have some sort of input that's tracked rotation and position. They call it 6 degree of freedom. And usually these are being powered by very powerful desktop computers, or now game consoles are starting to get in on the action. Their biggest problem is they're pricey, they can be complicated to set up, and they are tethered to that computer for now. And so, but it's the best experience you can get. It just is. Like, people, if you think you've seen VR and you've only seen a cardboard or a Gear VR and you have not done PC VR, you're doing yourself a disservice. Like, if you're an enthusiast of VR, find someone that has a Vive or a Rift. I'm partial to the Vive, but they're both great. And you can actually start to go to stores now and get demos. So they're becoming more accessible, but they're still pricey. And so it's the highest end, right? And then we'll move into augmented reality, which to me, people are scared to use terms around me when it comes to the mixed reality thing. I really don't care. I say AR I'll call Magic Leap an AR company. I don't care.
You're just reckless.
I am. I'm a rebel.
You are a dangerous
I am.
man.
I'm a digital realities rebel. So augmented reality to me is a very broad term as well. And it's basically, letting you interact and be a part of your physical world with this virtual information or virtual experience, also aware of this world, and providing some sort of display. And so the interesting thing about augmented reality, I broaden it out even more. I don't even think it's about a wearable display. It's not about a pair of glasses or goggles or whatever. It's your iPad can be an augmented reality display. There are heads-up displays in cars that can be an augmented reality display. So I really like that, because that's about pervasive technology, providing you with additional information that you would normally be able to pull up easily, and it's contextually aware. And then, of course, Pokemon Go is the biggest example of this. It runs on your mobile device. You can still see the real world through its camera feed, but they superimpose the monsters. And so augmented reality is kind of a more general term. Mixed reality is a weird one, because in 1995, mixed reality was coined to describe this entire spectrum. And the idea is that VR is a subset of mixed reality, and AR is a subset of mixed reality. And mixed reality is the slider where you determine how much of the real world you want integrated in, and how much you want to be completely immersed in the digital world. But recently, in the past 2 years, it's mostly driven by Microsoft and HoloLens and Magic Leap, this term mixed reality. And the reason why they did that was to kind of differentiate themselves from augmented reality. Is these companies are using sensors and a lot of high-end computer vision technology to detect the real world and reconstruct the real world for the purposes of the digital content being able to interact with the real world. So, for example, I walk into a room and the HoloLens will scan the room to know where the walls and floor are. And then my digital, character or whatever will interact with the walls, bounce off the walls, sit on the floor, and it'll appear to be in my real world. This virtual thing will be, and it'll also be locked to the real world frame. So meaning, if something runs around me in my real physical living room, it stays put, I walk to my kitchen, come back, it's still there. So there is a lot of sophisticated technology used to pull that off. And that's why they want to differentiate themselves from augmented reality, which is kind of this more simple version of it. And so I appreciate that. So look, I was deeply immersed in that world for 3 years in Florida. So I can't help but use that definition. And then it's further clouded by the VR industry has adopted the term mixed reality for how they record videos of VR. It's an unfortunate little, just to add to the confusion, I guess. But they call it mixed reality. And so yeah, that one's a tough one. And I just say AR.
AR.
So you could just say VR.
I'm doing it. I love that.
VRarmor.
That's the new thing now. Everybody's saying that.
Yeah. So
you could be the guy that coined that term.
No, I can't take credit for that one. Somebody, I'll have to look it up.
We'll have to get him on the show.
Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Somebody else. I
be a fine stand-in for.
I won't take credit for that one.
Okay, so that is an excellent kind of lay of the land, and this podcast being so new at the time of this recording, we haven't really had a chance to just break down to those basics, the ABCs of how this stuff applies. So, question for you about the potential of any of these in a learning experience. The magic trick, the illusion or the novelty of this is wonderful and super fun and creates a form of engagement just right out of the gate, kind of like going on the internet for the first time did for folks in say the late 90s. Someday, that novelty will wear off. Where will these technologies really matter beyond entertainment?
Yeah, so I mean, my whole thing is I've seen and worked with enough of this future tech that people haven't even seen yet, to where I'm fully convinced that this is the way we'll interact with technology going forward more and more. Eventually, laptops will kind of go away and smartphones will probably go away. I mean, we're talking over the course of 10 years because we're so invested in these things, but so I think it will be the way that children start to interact with tech. That will be the tipping point, right? That was the same thing with the smartphone. It's just like how, to roll it way back to the Monterey Bay Aquarium example, these kids were pinch zooming placards because as soon as they could talk, they were working with touchscreen devices. So once it reaches that level of accessibility where you're not afraid to hand it to your kid and play with it, and they actually get some entertainment and educational value out of it, I think that's a good signal that this is a mainstream tech. I don't think it's going to go mainstream for a couple years still. We're still just the cost and accessibility isn't quite there. And we need more interoperability. Like if you think about it, I'm sure there are classrooms that are trying to deploy like a current generation Vive to just say we have a VR experience. But, you've got you got to put it on and only one person can use it at a time. And it's, some just the cumbersome part of the whole thing. So I think it's difficult to see it being like more than a novelty in the short term. But then, yeah, so I always think about this technology not as a gaming thing. Gaming is a no-brainer because it's all 3D based, and just like me,
you're totally 3D.
I come from a game development background.
I can attest.
Yeah, I am. I do. I have atoms and photons. So yeah, the 3D part of it kind of makes it a natural fit for gaming. But I'm actually, just like my own career, I'm actually interested in how we use this for interacting with technology outside of gaming. I'm excited by games, and I think they will push. I mean, the probably the most successful consumer VR product right now is the PlayStation VR, and people are only going to play games with that. So I think that's great. But I want this to make technology more accessible to more people. And it's interesting because we've been through this cycle before, right? We had the web that took a lot of people by surprise, and then we had mobile that took a lot of people by surprise, and then they became these media and platforms, and so we've seen this ball coming before. And so to me, that's what's so exciting about all this is like I'm in the perfect intersection of I'm at the right age, I'm at the right experience, I see it coming and I'm ready, and mentally I've already seen ahead a little bit, so I know that this is feasible and it's not just a fad or a hype thing.
Vaporware.
Yeah. So I think that the applications are anything you can imagine using technology for moving forward. There is going to be some interesting bumps in the road with the fact that a lot of these things are wearable, and like, is it comfortable? Do you want to wear it? Is it something you just use in the privacy of your home, or is it something that, um, is a whole mix of these things? To kind of tie it back to my augmented reality definition, I love the idea that we have some sort of, we will always have some sort of battery powered compute on our body moving forward.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just how we are right now. But I love the idea of like walking into a room and my computing system is aware of the computing system in the room. And there's these seamless interactions where, it knows what I want to do, or it asks me what I want to do. And this is where you can get into talking about AI a little bit. And these things just kind of seamlessly happen, things that just make sense. Like,
Hmm.
I'm in my living room and it's approximately the same time, as every week I watch this same show. So why isn't there a system that just says, "Oh, hey, Paul, you must be here to do this. Or do you want to do it?" And it just happens. And then,
Hey, Paul, you
yeah,
you are a creature of habit.
yeah,
Are we
we
going to
all
do
are,
this
right?
again, Paul?
We are, yeah. And so, but right now and then that's the only other kind of, it's an opportunity. It's a blank slate opportunity. Like, these are the new platforms. We know what they can do. We know we will interact with them every day, and we know how it can also go bad, right? So, like, as much as you have this utopian vision of like all these systems working together, meanwhile, we had a bunch of friends at our house this past weekend, and we don't have cable service, and one of them wanted to watch a football game, and it was this insane gyrations of like pulling up the right app on the Apple TV, authorizing it through a web page on the computer, and like then finding it, and then it's like blacked out in one part. And it's like a part of it is technical challenges, but most of it is licensing and platform issues. Like, people want to own the platform, and they want to, you've got all these crazy agreements, so that's why you've got to authorize it on the computer. So business kind of gets in the way of some of this stuff. So right now VR doesn't have that. Right now VR is the Wild West, and people are putting crazy stuff out there. And there is no walled garden issue yet. And we're gonna have to deal with that. So as much as I like to be optimistic about the future, I know from a technical standpoint, I could make that thing I just talked about today, where I walk into a room and it does all these great things. But if I'm relying on my phone built by Apple, and like the in-room thing built by Amazon,
Hmm.
and then my display is built by Microsoft, are those things really going to talk together, or do they want to try to sell me on like the Microsoft room thing and the Microsoft phone thing? And so, but we have the chance right now to explore these things, and it's interesting. And like, I just had a conversation yesterday about that this does become a media. So then, to kind of bring it all back to your original question about education, and the interesting thing about this is ultra high tech, but we could actually make an effort to make this accessible to your average Joe and Jane, and like, they could take charge of this platform and this media,
So
right?
uh, this show is the intent of this show, the spirit of this show is so much to get to that point and to help people, really like myself. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a designer. I understand enough about those things to know that they're very important, and I'm not good at them.
Right, right,
uh, so, so can I do this? How do I do this?
right.
Where does one start?
Yeah, and that's, so to me, that's one of the things Vertex Labs ideas are revolving around, is tools. So my biggest thing right now is, I have a game development background. I love the Unity game engine and the Unreal engine, because I come from a world where we were building those engines from scratch. So the fact that I can license someone's engine, and it has a really nice editor tool, and it knows game development, I'm in heaven, right? It works. It works for me. And then you've got on the other, and you've got this video game development workflow, and pretty much because it is 3D and it's interactive 3D, all of these platforms generally support in particular those two game engines. So if you learn Unity, usually that's the first thing you'll hear. Learn Unity if you want to be able to make something in this stuff. And then you've got the total opposite end of the spectrum, which is Tilt Brush, which is this painting program for VR. And everybody gets it. You can put anybody in Tilt Brush, they will make something. They will feel creative and empowered to make something. And it's an experience only possible in this 3D platform. But if you're a professional creative or someone that wants to produce a very specific creative vision, you don't have enough control, and there's not quite it's not quite there yet on the ability to do everything you want to do. And so there's this huge gap in the middle of missing tools that are native to these platforms that allow people to become proficient. In particular, I'm really interested in people that are already professional creatives, so designers and user experience people. But there's just a wide gamut there to be played with. The other part of it is that's all focused on interactive 3D. The other part of it is film and 360 video. So I'm personally, like, I thought when Facebook rolled out the ability to do 360 panos in their timeline, I love that because I was taking these pano photos all the time. And now people that aren't even using VR, or they can still get the sense of a 360 thing. Mm-hmm. So 360 video, I'm personally not, I don't get crazy about because it's not interactive enough for me. But I appreciate there's a lot of people that do understand the idea of like stick a camera here and record, and then you can edit it together later. That's probably the most accessible VR content creation right now, I would say. And there's going to be more and more tools. I mean, there are tons of people working on this, but it is kind of inaccessible right now to just like your like hobbyist person that wants to like start creating things, unless you're doing like recording and playback type stuff. So I think right now that's the barrier, and that's why you're seeing a lot of the content is very short demo type experiences. There's not a lot of things that people go into every day to experience. However, there's also big companies working on this. So like the one that's most top of mind for me right now is Google released Google Earth just this week, and that is something. It's just we need more of those things, because that experience is a super cool first VR experience for somebody to see, because that gives them the taste of like what this means to be in full 6 degree of freedom, positional tracking, hand tracking. I can very naturally grab and move stuff. But then deeper than that is like, it's also not a game. It's not a painting tool. It's just our Earth. And so everybody has some sort of thing they'll want to look at, and they'll have some interest in it.
Everybody goes to their childhood house,
right,
or their place of employment or whatever.
Well,
and there we are.
And then speaking of that, Kent Bai was just telling me this week about how he was putting people in Google Earth and having them tell childhood stories.
Oh, killer.
So then they would go into their home, their hometown. And it is true that there's a ton of stories locked away in our minds that you don't even bother telling, because you can't show like this building or this street. But the minute you see them, you're like, oh, I can tell this. It fires off all these memories. And I think there's something there. And with respect to, we're very spatial minded people. And when you start to see these physical spaces again, it starts to trigger all these memories, because that's how we remembered stuff at that time, where everything's very relative to where we are to things.
Right.
So like Google Earth is a really good example of something that we need more of. This like, this, I really hate the killer app term, but we need more of these things that appeal to a wide range of people, that has more than just one function to it, So that's going to come, but I think it's going to be, right now there's no money in it. And you either have a company like Google who can afford to put this out and not make money off of it right away. They're just trying to uplift the platform. Or you have startups, and you have people kind of grassroots stuff, and they've either got to do it as a part-time thing, or they have some sort of self-funding going on. And that's going to be the lull that we're in for the next probably 12 months, 24 months. And in the meantime, the hardware is going to continue to evolve, get cheaper, faster, easier to set up. So I'm still thinking in the 1 to 2 year period is when we hit that sweet spot of like, you can tell somebody to go get a certain type of technology without a bunch of caveats.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hey, have you seen the video? This was just brought to my attention this week by Kyle Banuelos. Shout out to Kyle.
Oh,
Dash.
was that is that .dash.io?
That is actually the website address of
DOT.
I don't know if I've mentioned this. They're a sponsor of this show, and so there is a guy. I'm going to look this up as
I think we've
say.
got native advertising nailed.
Yeah,
podcast.
Is this what they call product placement?
Yeah.
So there's a guy who was learning calculus and using tilt brush to do it. Have you seen this one?
Is this the data viz thing?
It's so much more bare bones.
Oh, okay.
So it's just literally this guy, and let's see, calculus with, I'm just Googling, anybody can do this, calculus with tilt brush. And you'll find it on YouTube.
That seems like a pretty safe search.
Yeah, it's I shouldn't have spelled that one word the way I did. Yeah, so the title is HTC Vive Calculus in Google Tilt Brush. And this guy, John Sterling McGregor, is the one I'm looking at this moment. I don't know if he was the originator or not. But so the idea is he's literally just writing formulas just like you would on a whiteboard. It's just using it like a whiteboard. But he was also able to have his professor in his headphones, or I guess obviously watching it somehow. So I don't know what the technical configuration was. But what I found so fascinating about it is that this wasn't a program giving you the answers or running the calculations. Right. There wasn't even a basic calculator in the space.
Yeah.
But for one thing, the dark background is something that I think might be underappreciated. You know, we're used to a whiteboard being white, a chalkboard being green, and a virtual classroom, quote unquote, being a very cartoony space where we emulate what we have seen in real life in a less perfect manner.
Right.
So here we are in the classroom. Well, when the classroom is just infinite space and you can make things as big or as small as you want, there's no reason you can't write numbers just like you would write a Christmas tree.
Right. Yep. No, yeah, totally.
Draw numbers. So it just blew my mind, and I haven't quite yet come to terms with what this did to my brain, but I really want to focus on some of the analog capabilities of virtual space.
Yeah, that's one of the most exciting things about all of this is that, and I think the way I phrased it is, it's kind of crazy that we're like, it's the most high tech, bleeding edge effort, tons of money, tons of super smart people working on this. And the whole goal is to make things more natural, right? Like this guy's using, an approximately $2,000 to $3,000 computer VR setup to write, but he's doing it he's writing naturally. But then the power comes in that this is all virtual, so then you can draw spatial relationships. You can you could zoom out, you can zoom in. So it's so funny that like we're trying so hard to get back to what we do naturally with technology. And the other interesting part, and I've given talks about how we're tapping into the perception system, and our minds are so powerful. I mean, they are our reality. And once you start to understand some more parts about tapping into that, it's amazing the stuff that your mind does that you can exploit for hopefully good. Yeah. But yeah, there's I think we're going to unlock, I don't even know if I'm not going to quote a unbased fact, but there's always the old common myth about we only use a certain percentage of our brain. And I wonder if this is how we unlock the full potential of the mind. I think we're very spatial people. I'm very visual. And I think if you can allow people to tap into that with some assistance, it makes everybody that it's crazy to think about how things are going to be. How are we going to do anything in 10 years? I mean, maybe it'll be no different than we do today, but I don't think so. I think and that's what's so exciting about all this, right? We know there's something there. Like, like when you see that video, you're like, I know that there's value there.
Yeah.
And there's how can I use that for my thing? And
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about that moment.
right.
You know, there's infinity of those left
Yeah. And all it
undiscovered.
needs is more and more people using it
Yeah,
and like figuring out how it works for them.
right.
Yeah, and that's so like that map I made of Portland VRAR, that's just a web tool, but I pulled that data into a VR thing I built, and I'm gonna probably put it out for Vive, Rift, and HoloLens. But what I'm playing with is like I can now take this map and I can move these things around me, and I'm trying to figure out, is there utility in that, or is it just cool to play with,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm so close to the data. I already know these relationships because I'm the one that mapped it out. So what I want to do is like figure out, is there a way that like like my wife could care less about all this VR stuff. Could I put her in this experience, and could she extrapolate meaning from it? Does it tell her like, well, why don't we have more hardware people in Portland? Or, oh, I see where like this one company is also both a community and education, but they also do investment. So can can we get utility out of it? And I'm, because so many times I've had people that work in the financial industry, and they're like, oh, we have like 6 monitors, and we're so excited about like this new technology where we won't just not only not have to have all these monitors, but we can look at data in 3D. And I still haven't had any of those people explain to me, does that make them smarter, faster,
Right.
better traders,
Mm-hmm.
or is it just cool looking and gets rid of the monitors? I don't know. I'm assuming at some point somewhere someone will figure out a way to visualize that. That's like, yes, we would have never seen that on a 2D screen, or we couldn't have done that as easily in 2D, and it makes our company better for it. And I think that's going to come as people have access more and more tech. It's just exposure and it's accessibility. Um, it depends on the good news is none of this stuff is around really becoming successful consumer products, which is a whole other challenge,
Mm-hmm.
right? Around education and enterprise, I think that's why you're seeing most of the mixed reality. HoloLens specifically, they're really targeting enterprise because the devices are expensive. They've got to be managed a little bit. They're not really that consumer friendly, but there are already giant companies that already see where this could help the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to help push things along too. They don't care if you can play games on it or not. In fact, they probably prefer you didn't. So yeah, so there's going to be
Getting all the fun out of it.
yeah, but you can go home and have fun with your company provided HoloLens. But yeah, everything's moving in parallel. Everybody's excited. There's so much in literal investment in like money and time. People are getting tastes of the future, and I think most people, when they have a good experience, they're like, there's something powerful here, and we're nowhere near scratching off that, uncovering all that power, right? There's so many ways this could go, and then we'll keep having these little wins, and eventually it'll add up to like, the river will polish the stone of this technology, and it will be ubiquitous, and you will have kids in the classroom or people in the classroom that will have their VR or AR or mixed reality device, their VRMR device, and it will not be I can remember being in I'm gonna really date myself, in elementary school, and there was like the record player with the headphones in the corner,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like the special privilege to get to play a record and listen on the headphones. I think that's VR right now, right?
Little Tommy Edison was in the class.
Yeah, like if you were good, you got your record player time. So I think we'll see that this next year. There'll be eventually an elementary school will
That's
have
a
a riff
great
set
call.
up, and
That's a great call.
it'll be it'll be like a novelty for a little while. But I think it's great. I think it's great that people are playing with it and they're seeing it, because the more people that experience it and try to figure out how it can make life better, the faster we get to uncovering like, what is this next big, what is this new thing, right?
I love the polishing of stones analogy too.
Mm-hmm.
So they're about to kick us out of the studio here.
Mm-hmm.
They've got
Rightfully so.
other people doing stuff and things. Two last questions. One
Okay.
is, are you on the hunt for anybody from talent or clientele or otherwise that you would like to know about your interest in finding them?
Yes. I'm still very focused on Portland VR AR. So I'm still looking for anybody, like if people go check out that map and I'm missing someone, that's also my leads. So that's how I find out there must be somebody I need to talk to. I'm really focused on helping companies set up in Portland. I think Portland has a great quality of life. The cost of living for the West Coast can't hardly be beat.
Well, it was until you told them that we have sunshine in the summer.
Until I said it got warm here. And I really think there's a super collaborative, creative community here that makes it really fun to get work done here. And I think there's enough support around VR AR to make this a really compelling location to be. So I'm interested in finding out even more people here that are already here for the purposes of when I go out of market, when I go to Seattle, San Francisco, LA, and I do talk to people that are thinking about going somewhere else, I can confidently say, come to Portland, come talk to us in Portland. There's stuff going on. I just think this is going to be an amazing place to be 2 or 3 years from now when this technology does kind of cross that chasm. And I think if you're looking for a change and want to be an early part of that, now's the time to start establishing here. That's exactly why I'm here. That's what I'm doing. I'm getting ready. But yeah, I'm looking, I'm a connector, so I want to help people. I'm happy to advise. I make myself pretty easy to get a hold of on social media. I help companies, connect them to investors and advisors. I get a big adrenaline rush out of that. So, even though I'm an introvert, it's a really weird, somebody called me a super node this week, and I think he meant to say super nerd. But I'm going to go with super node.
Super node of rumor.
Yeah.
Paul Reynolds.
Verarmer. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just looking for anybody that's working on in the space that's either looking for some guidance. I'm happy to do that, or wants to share what they're working on that may be compelling. I'm open to it.
I love it. So the second question I had follows that right on the money. How do we find you online?
So my wife is a social media manager, so I have a very consistent, I'm Mug of Paul, because coffee and beer come in mugs, and it's my mug on there, but it's,
also hot chocolate for the kids out there.
Yeah, chocolate milk, MUGOFPAUL, that's, Twitter, Instagram, I think Facebook, and then, if anybody from Snap or Snapchat is listening, I'm really mad that I couldn't change my user name on there.
Snapchat.
So I'm all over everything.
Fist shaking in the air.
Yeah. Blog, the Vertex Labs blog. So if you go to vertexlabs.co, I don't have the M yet.
Soon.
There's contact information on there. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. LinkedIn, I'm Mug of Paul, I'm pretty sure. No, I'm Paul Reynolds on LinkedIn. Oh man, my wife's gonna kill me.
Corporate guy over there.
Yeah, that's my business profile. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Paul. It is a great honor to have you here. I mean that genuinely and sincerely. It's not every day that you have somebody in your own city that has been a part of something so big, so early, and so topic appropriate for a podcast on the subject.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, man.
Thanks.
Bye.
New School VR is graciously supported by and recorded live at Concordia University in beautiful Portland, Oregon. For over 100 years, Concordia has been preparing teachers and learning professionals for life and for a living. For more information, visit cu-portland.edu. And by ... an experiential design and technology studio specializing in custom virtual reality and experiential marketing activations that incite wonder and inspire action. See more at ... .io. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on iTunes or through your favorite podcast delivery app. Visit us online at newschoolvr.com, and thanks for listening. I'm your host, Pinky Gonzalez, and this his new school VR.
This VR podcast is dope.